that they're at now. So, like, I can say during that time, I had no fucking clue who New Japan was, or I'd heard people talk about Ring of Honor and stuff, but I was like, meh. Like, I didn't, like,
Well,
I've said it numerous times on the show. Up until the last couple years, I was a WWE, WWF ride or die. Like, if you were a different promotion, I didn't really care because, WWF, WWE, well, that was my shit. Like,
and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that for a good long while, a 5-year period, probably, like you said, Kurt Angle was the best wrestler in the WWE. But I can't, looking back and getting to know all the other promotions, I know that I wasn't a fan of them at the time. I wasn't a New Japan fan in 2008 and 9. I wasn't a Ring of Honor fan, and obviously AEW didn't exist and all that. But there was so many other talent out there that to say you were the greatest wrestler in the business at the time, that's what he said, business. I don't know if he just means WWE or the world, but we're going with the business as a whole, which would include all the other companies and such. So
I would, even if all these greats that we know now, Kenny Omega was tearing it up back then. The Young Bucks were in the Indies tearing it up and stuff.
Yeah, but
like,
at the time they were still like honing. They were honing their craft. I would say that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So like at that time, even though I consider Kenny Omega the greatest wrestler in the world today, he was still Kenny Omega back in 2008. But I ain't gonna judge how I feel about him now back then because back then I had no clue who they were.
But there were still people in the business like Hiroshi Tanahashi. It's hard for me to put anybody else on that pedestal because for a good while for New Japan, Tanahashi was the ace. Tanahashi was one of the greatest wrestlers in the business. To say Kurt was one of the greatest, yeah, but say the greatest, I don't think so. I think that's a bold statement. And it's nothing against Kurt because I like Kurt. I've always been a Kurt Angle fan. One of my favorite matches of all time is Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania. Those two put on a hell of a fucking match. But I just can't wholeheartedly agree with him and say that there was a period of 10 years where he was the greatest wrestler in the business. There's just too much talent out there. There's just too much talent in that spectrum of when he was on top of the world to say that he was. So, I mean, hell, there was talent like that in the Eddie Guerrero. He was going on at the same time that Kurt was at the top of his game. Rey Mysterio, fucking Chris Benoit. All these wrestlers were all very prominent and all doing very well at the same time that Kurt was. So, I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
but they were doing well, but that's also the same time that Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio were fighting for custody in a ladder match and stuff.
Well, we're not talking about the stories. I mean, fuck. Kurt had a love story with Stephanie McMahon that was shit. I mean, and this is going on around the same time.
True.
Kurt had his own share of dumb stories, just like everybody else did in the Ruthless Aggression era. We sat through the dumb stories because the wrestling was great from everybody in the Ruthless Aggression era. Yeah, you had your SmackDown, Mexicans on lawnmowers and Deuce and Domino, and Jimmy Wang Yang and shit. But you sat through those, like you said, for the great main events like Eddie and Kurt, or Brock Lesnar and John Cena, or, Rey Mysterio and Chavo. These guys would go out and tear the house down, put on some great matches, and all of them could be in contention for some of the greatest wrestlers of that time period, including Kurt Angle. But to sit down and say singly that Kurt Angle was the greatest wrestler of a 10-year or a 5-year span in that area of time, I just don't think is accurate. There's too much great talent on that roster. There's too much great talent on the rosters around the world at the same time to sit there and say, now, whether we heard of them or not, the internet wrestling community has been around for a long time. So regardless of whether we knew who they were, the world knew who they were. It was just a matter of getting them mainstream. So while Kurt Angle was putting on great 5-star matches with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania, so was Hiroshi Tanahashi in New Japan, and Minoru Suzuki, and Mitsuharu Misawa was even still around, I think, until 2009 or so. I mean, Shinya Hashimoto didn't pass away until 2011, and he was still doing some great stuff with Pro Wrestling Zero and shit. So, I mean, there's just so many wrestlers out there. I mean, like right now is a little easier because a lot of those wrestling companies are have made themselves known and found a way to get mainstream, and you're seeing so much. And right now, I can definitively say, at least in my opinion, that Kazuchika Okada is the greatest wrestler on the planet. You know, in my opinion, you know, second place has got to be Kenny Omega. And that's because we are so overstimulated to wrestling and so just absorbed into the great products we are getting from AEW, WWE, New Japan Pro Wrestling to Beyond Wrestling and all these great independents I'm starting to watch now too, that I can honestly say and give you an opinion that I think Kazuchika Okada is the greatest wrestler of this time. You know, and I feel like there's an accurate leg to stand on. Back then, you couldn't really give an accurate leg to stand on saying Kurt was the greatest wrestler of that time period.
I agree. It's definitely a super bold statement of him.
It was bold as fuck. You know. But I just thought it would be something we could talk about, which, you know, is an interesting conversation. Oh, this is going to be cool. Before we move on to any more news in this show, I wanted to give a special shout out to Mike Friedland, Jerry Lynn, and Mikey Whipwreck. These guys, you probably know you probably know Jerry Lynn and Mikey Whipwreck. But Mike Friedland is the host of a podcast called Front Row Material Podcast, and he's with those two ECW legends, both past ECW champions. Jerry Lynn, a current producer for All Elite Wrestling. Mikey Whipwreck, a badass wrestler, underdog wrestler from the 90s in ECW. These guys are awesome. I listen to their podcasts all the time, and I wanted to put them over because they put me over. And, you know, they're really cool. The fan interaction with this show is phenomenal. And I just want to say something because on their first podcast of the year, at the end of the show, after they did their episode, they mentioned the World Wrestling Podcast because I had talked to Mike Friedland a little bit, and I think he's going to ask a few questions I had and stuff. And like I said, their fan interaction is bar none. I mean, it's one of the best fan interaction, you know, podcasts I have listened to. And I listened to a lot of them, you know, for everything from Conrad and Taz when he was doing his, which we got an announcement about Taz coming up. You know, everything from all over the wrestling podcast scape, and I gotta say, fan interaction from a wrestler's podcast has got to go to the FRM podcast. They're really cool. If you haven't listened to them, you can find them on Google Play. I think they got some stuff on YouTube. They got some stuff on iTunes. Leave them a 5-star review. Make sure you do that. They're really cool. Very, very interactive and very educational. I've learned so much about ECW from this podcast. So, hats off to them. Really good guys. I fucking love them. You know, I hope that they keep this fan interaction going. I'd love to have a full-on conversation with them. I did mention, hey, if you ever want to jump on my podcast, you can, but I didn't really get a response about that. So, you know, they're busy. But I wanted to give them a shout-out. Have you listened to any of their stuff?
Yeah, I actually listened to that episode that they gave us the shout-out on. So, again, big shout-outs to them. Thank you so much. It's super awesome to get shout-outs from not only wrestlers but other podcasts. So,
real quick,
super cool.
When did you start the World Wrestling Podcast? Well, it was WWE Talk back then, but when did you start doing the podcasts again?
November was 6 years.
So, what's that, 2015? 2015?
I believe so.
Oh, no, that'd be 2014. So, from 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
No, hold on. Because November of 20 would make it 6 years. So, was it 13? That was on 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19? Because November of 19 would be 6 years if you started in 2013.
Yeah.
So, you started doing these in 2013. Did you think with under a decade you'd get mentioned on another podcast from ECW wrestlers and another guy?
No, hell no, man. Thinking, like I said in the last episode that we did, the final episode of 2019, 2019 blew me away. That was the year, like like all this stuff that I hoped that we would achieve in the World Wrestling Podcast, like we achieved plus some. We had a world television champion on. We had quite a few different wrestlers on, a commentator on. Just so much stuff happened last year that was just unbelievable. And now, like you said, we got ECW legends giving us shout outs and stuff, and just like it completely blows my mind every time you send me something saying that we got shout outs from like them, or get mentioned on Twitter by someone. I shit talked Zack Ryder and got a response from it, so it can just stuff like that just overall makes me like super happy and just unbelievable. And again, we say this every show, it's thanks to all the listeners out there all around the world. You guys have made this dream a reality.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun with this so far. I mean, I just hopped on in like 2014, I think, or 2015 when I started podcasting. And I was on and off, and then, you know, we fucking just kind of kept going with it, and now I'm doing it on a regular basis, and I've had a lot of fun doing it, you know, and meeting wrestlers and shit past any of my dreams I could have ever imagined, you know. So it's been a really cool couple of years, man. We've been doing really cool, and I can't wait to talk about this in 2030. You know, I'm looking forward to that. Fucking, we've got to do it 10 years. We got to make it 10 more years. Final episode 2030. That's what we're doing. Final episode is 2030. That's the final episode. We're gonna end it there. But
we're re-signing ourselves through 2030.
Yeah, fucking. Let's talk about that too, because right now, hold on a second. I think I was.
Speaking of people getting signed, I can help you segue into what you're looking for here.
Yeah, sorry.
You mentioned it a couple seconds ago.
I had an article, but it's disappeared. But no, yeah. So AEW has re-signed their contract up until I think it's 2023. You know, they're doing a 3-year contract.
Yep.
Which is really cool. Fucking. So I mean, TNT is putting a lot of stock into them. Not only are they re-signing for another 3 years, but they're re-signing, and there's going to be a second show on TNT.
That's what I heard, and I gotta say, I don't know if I'm quite digging it.
Well, it depends on how they do it, because from what I gather, from what I've heard, it's just going to be AEW Dark. You know, the thing we've had on fucking YouTube for, you know, the last couple of months and stuff, as well as
okay.
You know, so I think that's pretty cool. But if it changes, there could be a problem. Because if they try to do a second full-on live show, I think they're going to run into the same problems that WCW ran into, and that's overexerting themselves. They are they're just over a year old. And I think that trying to string themselves out past what they're capable of is going to do nothing for them, but eventually close their doors. I think right now they should be putting all their I think that all they should be putting all their focus onto their main TV and then their couple of pay-per-views a year, which was a good idea. I was totally okay with that. But putting all their focus onto their main TV every week. And if AEW Dark continues to be what it is, which is just extra matches from I was going to say Nitro, from Dynamite, where, you know, they take those matches and they put them on a separate show. It's like 2-3 matches, like 30, 45 minutes long, which is a good length for that. They could throw that on like a Sunday, you know, or a Saturday, you know what I'm saying? Like a Saturday morning AEW Dark kind of show on TNT, which would be kind of cool. I think that's a good idea, but to go and try and do another live show every week, I think it's a bad idea, personally.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was like looking at it. Is like they're overexerting themselves too quickly. Like, you only have 3 titles on your show. Like, if you were doing another show to, like, bump up your mid-card guys and stuff like that, then